welcome to the video. Take a deep breath and let it go. You've made it to a quiet place where the lights of the modern world dim, and the sounds of another century slowly begin to take their place. Tonight, we journey back not to the battlefields of conquest or the opulent ceremonies of sultans, but behind the doors of kitchens, courtyards, and long, echoing corridors. We drift gently into the world of servants in Ottoman Istanbul. This is not a tale of empires rising or of great men making proclamations. It is something slower, quieter, more familiar in its wariness. The hum of daily labor, the dull ache of cold floors beneath bare feet, and the endless repetition of thankless tasks. You will not be asked to understand everything at once. Just let the rhythm of these lives unfold like smoke through a window lattice, curling through time and memory. Tonight, we begin in the early hours, long before the city wakes. Let us begin again at the earliest breath of the day, in a city still wrapped in shadows. You awaken not to an alarm, not to bird song or sunlight, but to the creak of timbers above you, a shuffle of movement in the room next door. The air is thick and still, neither warm nor cool, but heavy with the scent of damp fabric, extinguished charcoal, and soap left to dry overnight. Your limbs are stiff, as they often are. The mat beneath you is woven from coarse straw and has softened slightly from use, though it still leaves faint crosshatch patterns on your skin. There is no time to lie still. The waking hour is not yours to choose. You pull yourself up, slowly and silently, and fold your bedding with practiced hands. No one taught you. You simply learn it by watching, by being corrected, by absorbing unspoken expectations that surrounded you like the stone walls of this house. You reach for your outer layer, thin wrap that has lost the softness it may have once had. Your feet touch the floor, and the cold cuts upward, reminding you of the season even more surely than a calendar could. It is always cold at this hour, regardless of summer or winter. The chill here lives in the stone. The hallway outside your sleeping quarters is silent. It is lined with doors, all closed. The rooms behind them contain other servants like you, some young, some old, some quiet, some always muttering under their breath about aching joints or strange dreams. A few are still asleep, stealing a few final moments before duty calls. But you have a floor to sweep. The reception corridor is long, wide, and tiled in gleaming marble. At this hour, it looks almost blue, lit only by the faintest light slipping through the intricate lattice windows. You pick up the broom. It is handmade, of coarse straw bound tightly to a smooth wooden handle. It is not heavy, but it has weight, and the work it demands will tire your arms before long. You begin with long, slow strokes, back and forth. The motion is so familiar you could do it blindfolded. Dust gathers at the baseboards, and your eyes scan for stray threads, tiny scraps of fabric, or the footprints of a careless guest who tracked in street dust the night before. You do not resent the work. You do not enjoy it either. It simply is, like breath, like sleep, like the whisper of the call to prayer that floats into the corridor from the far side of the city. The marble is beautiful. You must admit that. Pale cream shot through with faint gold and gray veins that swirl and knot like frozen smoke. You've learned which stones tend to grow slippery where the cracks have formed, and which corners require extra passes with the broom to satisfy the head maid's scrutiny. Sometimes, when you are alone, you imagine the marble as a sea, and yourself as a small, tired ship sailing between waves of polish and silence. Polishing brass comes next. There is always brass. The house collects it like a magpie hoards glittering things. The trays alone take hours massive. Round things, etched with delicate floral patterns and Quranic verses, their edges scalloped and worn from years of handling. Then there are pitchers and lamps, trays for coffee, hooks for hanging coats, hinges on doors, finials on bedposts, bowls, censers, mirror frames. Each must be rubbed until the dull gold of the metal gleams with a shine just shy of that of actual gold. The mixture you use is vinegar and salt, with a pinch of soot or ash if the tarnish proves stubborn. The rag is never clean. The blackness of yesterday's labor clings to it, like old stories that never quite fade. You dip it, squeeze out the excess, and begin. Small circles, never lines. Lines leave streaks. Circles coax out the luster, slowly, steadily. Your shoulders begin to ache before the third item is done. Your fingers prune from dampness. The scent of vinegar fills your nostrils, and for a moment you are dizzy not from the smell, but from the sheer repetition. You polish for hours, quietly, carefully. Voices stir elsewhere in the house. The madam is rising soon. Her favorite lamp filigreed, shaped like a minaret, must already be placed in the corner of her room, lit with just the right amount of oil to give a soft, welcoming glow. The cushions must be arranged, not simply stacked, but sculpted into pleasing forms and art of angles and fabric folds. Her robe must be laid out across the chaise, warmed slightly near the kitchen fire. Someone else will do that. You only see the result, and you do not ask questions. You return to the corridor. A new patch of sunlight has appeared, cast through a stained glass panel above the door. The light dances in colored patterns on the floor. You pause just for a breath to admire it. The blue resembles lapis lazuli, the green a splash of pomegranate skin, and then, quietly, you sweep through it, blending the colors into motion. You are not alone in your work. Other servants move like shadows through the house. One girl carries a stack of linens, freshly boiled and reeking of lavender water. A boy walks past with a brass basin too large for him, straining under its weight, but silent all the same. In the kitchen, the cook always the earliest to rise barks orders at an assistant who burns her fingers on a pot handle and bites her lip to keep from crying out. The butcher's apprentice arrives soon with meat. A bundle of herbs is tied to his belt, releasing a trail of sage and rosemary as he walks. The meat is heavy, wrapped in damp cloth, and will be trimmed and boiled before noon. You won't see that. Your place is elsewhere. And now, finally, food, if it can be called that. Not a meal, not a breakfast in the sense you might imagine it today, with eggs and bread and warmth. No, just something warm, something to quiet the stomach. A bowl of turnip mash cooled, since it was first prepared yesterday, stringy in parts, smooth in others, slightly bitter, the kind of taste that coats the tongue and refuses to leave. Sometimes there is oil drizzled over it. Often there is not. You sit on the kitchen step and eat it slowly. The bowl is cracked. The spoon is dented. The sun has risen fully now, casting the courtyard in golden light, but your position keeps you shaded. The day's warmth is still hours away. A breeze stirs dust along the flagstones. A cat watches from beneath a fig tree, tail twitching. You do not speak much. Conversation among servants is sparse in the morning. Everyone is saving their energy. There will be time for whispers and gossip later, once the rhythms of the house settle and there is space to breathe. For now, you chew quietly and glance at the small clock mounted on the wall. Not because you are tracking time for yourself, but because everything must be ready before the madam enters the public rooms. You must vanish before she arrives. She does not like to be reminded that people serve her. The tray must be arranged. Coffee, sweet and strong, in a tiny porcelain cup with gold trim. A small piece of candied apricot. A napkin, folded like a lily. A flower, sometimes, if one is available. You do not carry this tray. That duty belongs to someone higher in the household order. But you clean the tray, buff the surface, align the items just so. When the time comes, you slip away, unnoticed. Sometimes, you are sent to the courtyard to sweep. The courtyard is open to the sky, lined with arched colonnades and blue-glazed tiles. Birds nest in the rafters. Water drips from a fountain shaped like a tulip. The air is cooler here, the light gentler, but the work is the same. Leaves to gather, stones to scrub, the fountain rim to polish. And sometimes, when you are alone, truly alone, for a breath you pause, you stretch your aching back, you glance up at the sky. The clouds drift slowly over Istanbul's skyline, over the domes, the minarets, the laundry lines, the pigeons, and the smoke trails of distant cook fires. You close your eyes, and for just a moment, you imagine a different life, but only for a moment. There are linens to starch, windows to polish, carpets to beat, buckets to carry, water to fetch. There is always more work, and always more silence. You slip back into motion like a thread drawn through cloth, vanishing into the fabric of the house once again. No one sees you, no one must. Imagine now that the sun is climbing higher. Its light presses softly through the intricately carved wooden shutters, casting patterns that ripple gently across the floor like slow-moving waves. You are still moving, still working, still unseen. In this world of ritual and repetition, your footsteps trace the same routes every day, wearing invisible paths into the stone. He receives a brief nod of acknowledgement, no more. His task is done. Yours, however, continues. They are not meant to be eaten. These ones are for show, for fragrance. Everything must be composed with intention, even fruit. If one has a bruise, it is set aside for the kitchen. You will be the one who juices it later, your hands sticky and stinging from the citric acid as it seeps into cracked skin. She is barely older than you, dressed in silks and a veil embroidered with rosebuds and tiny silver threads. She brushes past without meeting your gaze. Her perfume follows her, something faint and expensive, a blend of rosewater and ambergris. You bow your head instinctively, not because anyone sees, but because it's safer that way. Averted eyes are a kind of protection. The soap you're allowed is coarse, more ash than oil and rarely lathers. It's made for floors, not bodies. Still, you try. You rub your palms together, listening to the faint grit. The day is long, and your hands must be presentable, even if the rest of you is invisible. The kitchen girl scrapes the scales from a fish with a metal edge, the sound soft but persistent, like a blade drawn across a drum. You carry a bowl of peeled onions to the hearth and begin slicing. Your eyes sting, and you blink through the tears. No one speaks. Words are precious. Time is not. How to carry water without sloshing. How to fold the towels precisely with the embroidered corners showing. How to sweep not just under furniture, but behind the hidden legs of low benches where dust likes to gather. How to smooth the bedding so that it appears untouched. How to kneel silently when summoned, to speak only when spoken to vanish before being noticed. Once, a girl left a streak on a brass lamp and was reassigned to cleaning the latrines for a week. Not because of the stain, but because the madam was displeased with the impression it gave. Another time, a boy dropped a tray, shattering a delicate porcelain cup imported from Venice. He was not punished immediately, he was simply replaced. Dismissal does not always come with warning. It comes like a storm, sudden and unannounced, sometimes with a whisper from the steward, sometimes with a silent gesture from the head maid, and then the door closes behind you, and you are gone from the household, as if you were never part of it at all. You whisper a short prayer before entering a room, asking only for invisibility, for nothing to go wrong. That the upstairs maid saw a French doctor slip into the back door of the neighbor's house. That the eunuch steward has a hidden drawer of coins under his bed, stashed away for when he can finally retire. No one says these things loudly. They are murmured over shared trays of rice, over laundry tubs, over steaming pots. But the stories swirl and change shape like reflections on water. Sometimes the gossip is cruel. One girl accused of stealing sweets, another rumored to have spoken with a male servant alone. These things are not trivial. They stain your name like soot. And in a household where hierarchy is everything, your reputation is your only defense. With a thin green rim and a tiny chip near the handle that she never acknowledges. You are the one who ensures it is washed gently and placed just so on the tray. If it is missing, she notices. If the coffee is too hot, she scolds. If the sugar cube is slightly larger than usual, she frowns in silence. You learn to anticipate her mood by the set of her shoulders, by the way she pins her scarf. It becomes instinct. You hover just out of sight, ready, with trays, tea, cushions, sweets. The mistress entertains with grace. You marvel at her ability to glide across a room without touching anything, her voice smooth as honey, her smile practiced. You would not dare to imitate her, but you watch. You always watch. You gather cups, brush crumbs from divans, fold throws. The air is still perfumed, and the cushions retain the warmth of other bodies. You move quickly. You know how little time there is before the next task. By mid-afternoon, your legs ache, but the day is not done. Linens must be ironed weighted down with heavy presses that smell faintly of charcoal and lavender water. Brass must be polished again. Floors must be swept anew. Dust never rests, and neither do you. A new dress must be prepared for the younger mistress. You unfold the silk carefully, mindful of the thin, embroidered vines winding through the fabric. The sleeves must be pressed without creasing. The hem must be straightened. The scent sachets placed discreetly inside cloves, dried rose petals, and a sprig of thyme. You do all of this in silence. There are times when you feel yourself fading, not in body, but in sense. You become the hands that scrub, the eyes that notice dirt, the back that bends to lift. You stop being you and become only the girl from the laundry or the one who carries coal. The detachment is comforting in a way. It makes the days easier to bear. The sun begins to set, the air cools, the light shifts. You light the lamps in the hallway. One by one, their golden glow warms the blue shadows. You pause briefly at the last one, watching the flame flicker against the glass. It feels almost holy. You imagine just for a second that this is your home, that you are lighting lamps for your own family. But the illusion passes. There is still work to be done. The master returns. You hear the outer gate creak, the sound of his boots on the stone. The entire house changes. Even the air tightens. Everything must be perfect. Slippers placed, coat brushed, scented cloth handed to him discreetly. His evening coffee prepared. You are not allowed to make eye contact. Evening brings new tasks: washing dishes, laying beds, pressing garments for tomorrow. Sometimes there are evening prayers. Sometimes there is music in the upper rooms. You hear the plucking of an oud, the soft tapping of a tambourine, voices singing in low harmony. Just a moment. Your feet are swollen. Your fingers are red. Your eyes sting from the oil lamp's smoke. And yet, you keep going. You fold towels. You stoke the brazier. You sweep again. You wait until the last light goes out. Only then are you allowed to retire. You return to your mat. You unwrap your shawl. You stretch your legs and flex your fingers. The room is still lit only by the faint glow of a distant lantern. You lie down, finally, your back pressed to straw. You listen to the creak of beams, the breath of the girl beside you, the settling of the house, and you wonder, will tomorrow be any different? You know the answer, but still you wonder. And the day ends as it began, in silence, in stillness, in shadows. You have spent your morning quietly. Your hands have moved across brass handles and fraying cotton seams. You have nodded, bowed, and murmured answers in the soft, deferential tones expected of someone who works unseen. Now, with the house settling into its afternoon hush, you find yourself carrying linens through a cool, tiled corridor. And as you move through the silence, you hear it again, the name Cakesum. It is not spoken with awe, nor with hatred. It floats like incense, heady, strange, and lingering long after the moment has passed. You have never seen her, of course, not truly. You are a servant far removed from the palace, one thread in the vast tapestry of Ottoman Istanbul. But even here, in a private home, nestled between shadowed alleys and jasmine-wrapped courtyards, her influence spills like ink on water. You see it in the way your mistress arranges her hair, in how the steward carefully chooses his words when discussing palace affairs, in the cautious, reverent glances the women share whenever the name passes their lips. And so, as your hands continue their work, your thoughts drift gently, like smoke curling beneath a dome toward her story. She was not born into power. She came from a place far from these domes and tiled mosaics, an island in the Aegean, perhaps. The records are blurred, names lost in transit. Some say she was born Anastasia, a Greek girl taken during one of the countless raids that swept across the archipelago. She was young, barely more than a child, when she was pulled from the sea breeze and soft stone homes of her island life and delivered to the heart of the empire, not to a merchant's house, nor a brothel, but to the palace, to Topkapı. There, within the walls of the harem, the innermost sanctum of Ottoman court life, she vanished from the world she had known and began again. Her name changed, her clothes changed, even her posture, her walk, her voice. Everything she had been was pressed down into the fabric of someone new, a concubine, a student of silence, a woman taught to be watched without revealing what she saw. And yet she watched, she remembered. The imperial harem was not a garden of idle beauty, nor a cage of passive luxury. It was a court with its own systems of power, its own hierarchies and rivalries. It was a place where a single word spoken too soon or too late, could doom a woman to a life of service or lift her to unimaginable influence. Cakesum rose quietly. She was chosen by Sultan Ahmed, the first still young himself. His rule was marked by a desire for stability in a time of fracture. And perhaps it was something in her calm, her eyes, her silence, her gentle refusal to be shaken, that drew him in. Unlike many of the women in the harem, Cakesum did not seek only to please. She sought to endure. As chief consort, or Haseki Sultan, she bore him children's sons who would shape the empire, and daughters who would carry her name across distant courts through arranged marriages. But it was not childbirth alone that secured her place. It was strategy. She built alliances. She placed her own servants in positions close to power. She kept letters and memories and names. When Ahmed died, the empire entered a familiar kind of uncertainty. Succession in the Ottoman world did not pass cleanly from father to son. It passed to whomever could survive. Brothers were pitted against brothers. Court factions stirred, and eunuchs and viziers whispered in shadowed alcoves, each weighing the next possible heir. Cakesum made her move. She did not claim a throne. She claimed a voice, and with that voice, she advocated for her son, Murad, still a boy, still soft in face and uncertain in footstep. But his blood was royal. His mother was determined. Murad IV ascended, and with him, Cakesum began her rule. Not publicly, not in speeches or ceremonies, but in the steady hand she placed upon the reins of the empire. She became regent, a woman ruling in the name of her son, guiding ministers, issuing orders, receiving foreign dignitaries behind silk screens. And all the while, she remained behind veils, not out of modesty, out of precision. She understood that real power was quiet. From within the palace, she played a long game. The Janissaries, once a dangerous military elite, prone to rebellion, were calmed with bribes and carefully placed loyalties. Provincial governors, some of them ambitious and cunning, were rotated before they could entrench their own power. Taxation policies were adjusted, grain supplies stabilized, and trade routes made secure, not with declarations, but with parchment and seals, with messengers carrying her will beneath the imperial crest. Your mistress does not speak of these things, but she knows. Everyone in the upper circles knows, and you, folding linens in the afternoon warmth, feel the reverberations of that quiet rule. The women in your house follow Cakesum's lead in how they address their husbands, in the ways they host female guests, in the designs embroidered on their sleeves. If Cakesum favors a particular motif, tulips, stars, water birds, then it will appear in brocade across the city within weeks. That is how you understand power, not in proclamations, but in the way it reshapes the world without announcing itself. Murad IV grew into his role, and as he matured, his rule became ironclad. He feared disorder and imposed harsh reforms. Alcohol was banned, coffee too. Public morality was strictly policed. Executions were frequent, yet Cakesum endured, stepping back into the shadows without ever losing her reach. She let him shine as she had planned, and when he died unexpectedly without a strong adult successor, she returned to the fore once again. She installed her other son, Ibrahim, on the throne, a man unsuited to rule, tormented by suspicion and mental fragility. He spent long hours locked in rooms, obsessed with odors, fabrics, superstitions. In his paranoia, he grew violent, but Cakesum remained. It is easy to forget. The empire's fate turned on her decisions. Ambassadors from Venice, Persia, and France wrote of Hernever with certainty, always with a kind of uneasy reverence. The woman behind the curtain, the voice in the Sultan's ear, some feared her, others admired her. Many sought her favor. As Valley Sultan, she commanded a stipend greater than any man save the Sultan himself. She had her own court, her own informants, her own network of loyalties. In an empire ruled by male power, she was the exception that proved the rule could be bent. And yet, you know because you have lived it that power never comes without cost. Cakesum made enemies, even in the harem, where women were trained to veil ambition behind smiles. Hatred simmered, rivals plotted. Her influence threatened viziers who wished to rule themselves. Her sons grew wary of her. Court factions began to divide, some favoring her, others longing to see her fall. But we will save that fall for later. Now, as you set down the tray of coffee and fold your hands behind your back, you think of the girl she once was, taken from her island, dressed in strange clothes, surrounded by strangers. You wonder if she had a servant once, who carried linens as you do, who swept her room before she rose, who fetched her oils and whispered her name in the dark. Perhaps she did. And perhaps that servant, too, watched her rise and wondered what it would be like to live beyond the rules, beyond the lashes and curtsies, beyond silence, perhaps. But for now, you tuck the thought away. The master has returned. The lamps must be lit, and history, as always, continues in silence. The servants of Istanbul do not often speak the names of the palace women aloud, but they know the consequences of their power. Kasem's name still ripples across neighborhoods like yours, even though the palace gates are miles away. You've never seen her, but you've heard tales, not from official records. Of course, those are silent or softened or written by those who feared to say too much. No, the real stories float in the kitchens. They rustle in the laundry lines. They are passed hand to hand, like scraps of lace or hidden coins. They say she never raised her voice, that even at the height of tension, even in the face of defiance from grand viziers or janissary captains, she spoke quietly, firmly, that she never appeared rattled, not even once. They say her favorite flower was the narcissus, and that she wore a scent of saffron and clove that lingered long after she left a room. They say her guards were loyal beyond reason, and that her letters were always sealed with a particular green, waxed deep like olive leaves. Some servants believe she could read dreams, that she understood the meaning of symbols and patterns, and kept a book filled with private omens, that she once predicted a fire before it started, that she knew which baby boys would grow into strong sultans and which would not live to adulthood. Most of this, of course, is myth. But when you live in a world ruled by veils and secrets, myth is often the only truth you're allowed to speak. Back at Topkapı, life for Cakesem was lived inside screens, but it was never idle. She managed the massive household of the harem, where hundreds of women lived, studied, and worked. Young girls, some no older than 30, arrived weekly, brought in from across the empire. Some were trained for service, some for beauty, others for politics. Cakesem watched them all. She understood what it was to be one of them, and she understood how to separate the ones who could be useful from the ones who would be forgotten. She began placing women loyal to her in other palaces, in other provinces. One became the wife of a vizier. Another was sent to Cairo. One of her favorites, it's said, was married off to the governor of Aleppo. Through them, she extended her reach. Their letters returned to her, folded in linen, carried beneath trays of fruit or tucked into the seams of leather slippers. She read everything. She even placed her own staff in foreign embassies, ostensibly as cleaners or kitchen hands, but in reality, watchers. Their eyes became her eyes, their ears, her ears. It's hard to imagine, while polishing brass or folding blankets, that a woman behind a lattice could shape global politics, but she did. Foreign diplomats noted her in their letters home. The French ambassador wrote of her as the mother of the empire. A Venetian envoy called her the only person in Constantinople who truly rules. Of course, these were men who never saw her. Their words were wrapped in suspicion and a hint of condescension. They didn't know how to describe a woman who governed without thrones, who pulled strings without ever being seen holding them. But you understand it in your own way. In your household, you've seen how influence works. You've seen a single whispered word from your mistress shift the entire mood of a dinner. How a brief glance can shame a younger servant into obedience. How the smallest change in routine new slippers, new perfume can ripple out and change the whole rhythm of the home. Cakesum did that, not just in one household, but in a dozen provinces, and for decades. And her power did not end with her sons. After the unstable reign of Ibrahim, her son, came her grandson, Mehmed IV. He was only a child when crowned. The empire trembled again, but once more, Cakesum stepped in. She became regent for a third time, a woman ruling for her grandson. No valid sultan had ever ruled across 3 reigns before. No woman had ever held court so long or so effectively, but there she was, still commanding, still whispering, still balancing alliances, still surviving. You wonder if she ever paused to feel pride, if she ever allowed herself a moment of stillness, if she sat by the tall windows of her chamber and looked out at the city, the domes, the ships, the minarets, and thought, this is mine, too. Maybe, maybe not. Those who climb high must always watch the ground below, and below, trouble had begun to stir. Her daughter-in-law Turhan Sultan, the mother of young Mehmed, was growing restless. She was younger, ambitious, and increasingly surrounded by those who wanted Cakesum gone. She, too, had learned to navigate the harem. She, too, understood the power of screens and shadows, and she wanted to rule herself. Cakesum could see it coming. They say she began to sleep less, that she added new guards to her chambers, that she spoke more carefully, even among her most loyal servants. It's a quiet kind of dread, the feeling that someone is coming for your place. You know it in your own way. That sensation when a new maid arrives in the household, young, favored, fast to learn. You feel your own hands growing slower, your back aching more. You fear being replaced, even if no one says so aloud. Cakesum must have felt it, too. And then, one night, the betrayal arrived. But that part of the story is not for now. We will leave her in the stillness before the storm in the final days of her control, when the empire still turned according to her hand, because what matters here is not how she fell, but how long she stood. From a girl captured in youth to the most powerful woman in the Ottoman world, Cakesum Sultan mastered the most dangerous court in the world for nearly half a century, not by force, not by inheritance, but through quiet, deliberate mastery of people, of time, of secrets. And even now, long after her voice has gone silent, she is remembered, not always fondly, not always clearly, but remembered. And in a house like yours, far from the palace, she lingers still, in the way your mistress carries herself, in the perfume on her sleeves, in the fact that you, a servant, even know her name. That is power, real power, the kind that does not fade with death. And as you move through your final tasks of the day, folding, sweeping, setting trays, you carry a little of her story with you. You do not rule, but you endure, just as she did. Imagine it is night. The lamps have been dimmed across the household. The hallways have gone silent, save for the occasional groan of settling wood or the soft shuffle of fabric in the servant quarters. The house exhales, as though after a long, stiff day, and somewhere deeper in the city, beyond the clusters of domes and alleyways, beneath the heavy weight of marble and silk, a door closes. There is a room in Topkapı Palace, unremarkable to the untrained eye. It smells faintly of oud oil and lemon water. The floor is warm beneath layers of thick carpet. Latticed screens cast dappled shadows along the walls, shadows that shift like slow-moving fish in a still pond. In that room, a woman kneels. Her posture is perfect, her expression unreadable. Her scarf has slipped slightly back, revealing strands of silver-threaded hair. It is Cakesum. She is older now. Her voice is softer. Her robes hang more heavily on her frame. But she is still thirtily herself, and she is not alone. The details of what followed that night remain a matter of debate, speculation, and whisper. No chronicler agrees entirely. No witness tells the same tale. But the ending is not in doubt. She did not survive the night. The empire's most powerful woman was murdered in her chambers by men once loyal to her, under orders from her own daughter-in-law. It was not dramatic, not like in the plays or in the cautionary tales. There was no shouting, no storming of doors. There was simply a quiet moment, then silence, then a long, slow breath from the palace, as though something sacred had slipped away. And when the sun rose the next morning, it was as if the empire had exhaled without her. Now, pause. Step back from the palace. Return to your own quarters, your mat on the floor, your folded garments stacked neatly by the wall, the soft scrape of a bowl being stacked in the kitchen. For you, that night may have passed without recognition. No drums, no funerals, just a shifting in the atmosphere, a slightly changed tone in your mistress's voice, a new decree hung outside the mosque, a sudden arrival of soldiers in the neighborhood, walking a little faster than usual. You might not even have heard her name spoken, but the world changed that morning. Kasum's death was not merely the end of a woman's life. It was the quiet unraveling of an era. For decades, she had been the steady pulse behind Ottoman policy stabilizing crises, negotiating with provincial governors, arbitrating succession struggles. Her rule was rarely acknowledged openly, but everyone who mattered knew. She held balance in a court that was otherwise inclined toward chaos. And now she was gone. And into the vacuum flowed many things. Turhan Sultan, her daughter-in-law, stepped into the role of valid sultan, the new mother of the reigning child sultan, Mehmed IV. But though she was clever and capable, she inherited a court still trembling from Kasum's long shadow. Foreign ambassadors responded quickly. The Venetian Bilo wrote that the lioness has been slain, but her claws remain in every corner. Diplomats from the Safavid court expressed cautious optimism, believing the empire would now be easier to manipulate. But they underestimated what Kasum had left behind. She had not merely ruled, she had trained dozens of women servants, scribes, companions, informants had learned under her gaze. Eunuchs, who owed their rise to her, remained scattered across the empire, in ports and forts and palaces. Governors, having once feared her letters, still followed policies she had designed. Her foreign policy, in particular, had been deeply subtle. She believed in avoiding large-scale war unless absolutely necessary. She had been careful to balance relations with Venice, to stall conflict with the Habsburgs, to discourage reckless campaigns into Persia. She favored trade, tribute, and manipulation over bloodshed. It was not peace out of kindness, it was strategy born from deep understanding. And now, the men around the throne were eager to change course. In the years that followed her death, the empire shifted. Mehmed IV, under the influence of his own circle, launched new military campaigns. The Kapulu family rose to prominence, fierce, reforming grand viziers who sought to restore military might. Wars with Austria reignited. Clashes with the Russians intensified. The empire expanded again, but at cost. And yet, in all of it, there were still echoes of her restraint. Some decrees mirrored her old mandates. Some treaties were written using formulas she had pioneered. Some alliances were brokered through women she had once appointed to pharaoh courts. Because the truth of palace power is this: it is never entirely removed. You know this in your own life. Even when a former steward is dismissed, his preferences linger. The way the tea is poured, the sequence of how trays are stacked. Even in absence, his habits remain like fingerprints on glass. So too with Cakesem. She had built a style of rule that relied not on declarations, but on habits, on rituals, on expectations. She had shaped the way people thought the court should operate, and long after her voice had gone silent, those expectations remained. Her legacy was not one of love, nor one of fear. It was a legacy of architecture, of scaffolding built inside the invisible framework of empire. Now, outside the palace, you might begin to see the changes more clearly. A new tax appears on the butcher's wall. Your mistress receives a new velvet robe, gifted from a cousin whose husband has risen in the military. The steward mentions, over a plate of dates, that the coffee ban has been relaxed again. You do not link these things to Cakesem. You don't need to. You simply live in the world she once ruled, and in your quiet place in it, folding robes, stoking coals, preparing the rooms for evening prayers, you find yourself thinking of her. You've heard the whispers, that she was strangled with her own scarf, that she pleaded for her life, that she forgave her killers, that she cursed them. The stories shift, but the one thing everyone agrees on is this: she never screamed, not once. That is what you remember. That even in the end, she kept her dignity, her silence, her unshakable stillness. And so you fold the towel one more time. You smooth its edge with your palm. You line up the corners, and you place it where it belongs. The world continues, now shaped by the memory of someone gone. And somewhere far away, beyond the gardens and the prayer towers, a small corner of the palace still bears her name, though no one speaks it aloud. You awake early the next morning, just as the first light begins to stain the stone walls of your courtyard. There's a dampness in the air, a thin, cold dew that settles on the tiles like a breath waiting to lift. You rise, brush your palms together, and begin the day's ritual. The fire needs lighting. The wash basins must be filled. There are sandals to arrange at the threshold, lemon peel to press into the floor cracks, and yesterday's stale bread to break for the pigeons on the sill. You do it all without thinking. These tasks are not taught. They are absorbed, passed silently from servant to servant, like an old story that no one remembers beginning. And though your hands are busy, your mind floats back to her, to Cakesum, gone now, but not gone. She lives in these rituals, not because she invented them, but because she understood how deeply repetition builds memory and how memory builds control. During her years in the harem, she left little to chance. She knew that the people who wake early, the ones who clean the ink pots and set the morning fires, shape the mood of the day before anyone else lifts their heads. So she filled those positions with people she trusted. The guards who stood silently outside her door, the handmaidens who tended to her ablutions, even the eunuchs who carried gossip between chambers. These were not anonymous bodies. They were instruments, each chosen carefully, each positioned deliberately, each link in a long, silent chain of influence that reached from her room to the outer gates of the empire. And it is those same patterns refined, passed down, reshuffled that remain long after her body was laid to rest. Foreign policy, one might think, is the realm of armies and diplomats, of letters signed in gold ink and messengers galloping across borders. But within the Ottoman court and under Kasem's guidance, policy was often shaped by what never happened, by what was delayed, by who was not promoted, by which rumor was allowed to spread and which was crushed before it reached the Sultan's ears. Even after her death, some of her oldest strategies held. Take Venice, for example. For decades, the Venetians had walked a careful line with the Ottomans' trading luxuries, avoiding direct confrontation, bribing the right intermediaries. Cakesum had understood the fragility of this relationship. A major war would drain the treasury and risk destabilizing the court. So she cultivated patience. When minor disputes arose over shipping lanes or border towns, she soothed them behind closed doors. The agreements she had made, the careful, unwritten understandings, continued to hold long after she was gone, not because her successors believed in them, but because the mechanisms she'd created were still in motion. Her scribes had trained the next scribes. Her secretaries had shaped the next interpreters. Her system persisted. Even Turhan Sultan, who had ordered her death, governed from within the shell Cakesum left behind. That is the true mark of power, not how loudly you command when you are alive, but how long the echoes of your hand endure after you've fallen silent. The same could be said of your household. When your previous steward passed, old Ibrahim, with his stiff leg and his habit of mumbling over the accounts, you expected everything to change. A new steward was brought in, younger, sharper, more exacting, but still, in the quietest parts of the day, you find yourself repeating Ibrahim's way of stacking the accounts, of setting the guest cushions, of portioning out the spices. Old patterns do not disappear easily, especially when they work. And Kasem's patterns, her alliances, her silences, her subtle rearrangements of power continued to shape the Ottoman court for another generation. Even during moments of dramatic change, the rise of the Köprülü viziers, the renewed wars with the Austrians, the internal revolts there, remained a core of imperial management that bore her influence. The roles of the valid sultan, the quiet deference paid to certain eunuchs, the language used in harem edicts, these were hers, even when her name was no longer spoken. Some say she lingers still in the palace, not as a ghost with chains or wails, no, but as a presence, a habit of silence in certain corridors, a tendency for maids to bow a little lower near the imperial quarters, a pair of chambers that no one enters without permission, though no one remembers why. There is a marble fountain near the tulip gardens, mall half forgotten, where the water flows especially softly. Some say it was her favorite place. Others say it was where she first heard the whispers that led to her fall. There is no plaque, no memorial, only the water and the silence. You think of that hours later as the day unwinds again. The sun is low now, casting long shadows across the courtyard tiles. The city breathes in its afternoon rhythm call to prayer, the smell of bread baking, the muted clatter of carts returning from the ferry landings. Inside the house, your mistress prepares for guests. She has laid out her best scarfta, one with the green tulip embroidery that you quietly stitched last year. She inspects herself in the mirror. She adjusts her bracelets. She pauses and then asks softly, "Do you think it's too much?" You shake your head, but inwardly you know the performance is part of the point. Your mistress learned that from the palace women, from the old court, from Kasem's legacy. Power is not in shouting. It is in looking perfect while saying nothing, in listening more than speaking, in being the one whose silence others interpret as a command. You prepare the tea, arrange the plate of sugared dates, and retreat to the shadows. And as the house grows still, once again, you wonder, will anyone remember you when you're gone? Will your folding patterns survive in the next maid's hands? Will the scent you prefer rosewater with a trace of mint linger in the halls for years after? Maybe not, but maybe. And as you move through the familiar silence, your steps light and your thoughts soft, you understand what Kasem must have known better than anyone, that history does not always remember the loudest voices. Sometimes it remembers the one who understood how to speak without speaking. And that, in the end, is legacy. There are places in the city where the past sits especially close. You might pass them every day, just another tiled wall, another crumbling corner. But if you pause and look carefully, you notice something beneath the surface, a shift in the mortar, a step that dips lower than expected, a grate that hisses faintly when the breeze turns from the sea. And beneath it all, if you could peel away the layers of stone and time, there are corridors, passages, forgotten thresholds. You've never seen them, but you've heard the rumors. In the palace, it is said, there are tunnels, not large ones, not the sort for grand entrances or wide processions. The stories differ. Some say these tunnels once connected the harem to secret docks along the Bosphorus, where favored women might be taken quietly by boat under cover of darkness to distant villas or safer shores. Others claim they led beneath the treasury halls, providing a shadow route for the movement of jewels and scrolls too valuable to risk by open courtyards. Still others insist the tunnels were used by spies' servants loyal to Kasem or to her enemies, slipping notes and whispers along paths no guard could monitor. But no map remains, no official record, only fragments and stories. Once, long ago, a junior tile inspector working in the Topkapı kitchens dropped a mallet into a floor grate. When he removed it, a section of flagstone gave way. Beneath, he saw stairs descending into darkness, crumbled, blocked, filled with fine white dust. He told no one, and years later, on his deathbed, he described it to his grandson, who then passed the story along to a friend of your mistress's cousin. This is how memory works in Istanbul, not in scrolls or ink, but in the folding of cloth, in the way a servant glances twice at a wall, in the extra brushstroke of lemon oil on a particular tile, as you sweep your own corridor, one that leads not into any palace, but into your master's study. You think of such things, the quiet architecture beneath the world, the spaces no one speaks of, but everyone knows are there. And it is not just tunnels that linger, it is scents. In the imperial harem, perfumes were not luxuries, they were languages. A concubine might wear jasmine oil to signal contentment, amber to suggest intimacy, or myrrh to signify mourning. A drop of rosewater on a sleeve could change a conversation. A spritz of clove at the wrist might stir suspicion or longing, depending on the day. The palace walls were steeped in these scents. They lingered long after their wearers had passed. And in one particular storeroom, sealed for generations, buried beneath a collapsed section of roofing near the palace's eastern wing, those scents still remain. When the chamber was accidentally unearthed by conservation workers in the mid-20th century, they expected to find pottery shards or broken bricks. Instead, they uncovered sealed glass vials intact, untouched, thick with centuries-old perfume, carefully catalogued, tested, and preserved. The scents revealed a mixture of sandalwood, cinnamon, cardamom, and rare resins no longer traded in the empire's markets. Some believe the bottles belonged to Cakesum herself. Others suggest they were part of a bridal chest, stored for a daughter's wedding that never came. No one knows for sure. But the moment one of the bottles was uncorked, witnesses reported that the scent drifted through the room like breath from a forgotten mouth. The air turned soft. The researchers fell silent. And for a few long seconds, it was as though someone real, with memory and presence, had entered the room again. That is the power of scent. It anchors time. It binds you to people who no longer walk the world. You know this too. Your grandmother's kitchen smelled of cardamom and warm bread. Your mother's shawl, even now, retains a trace of lavender oil despite years in a drawer. The laundry soap you use today, the one your mistress insists, a Pawnee's, made with crushed citrus peel. And every time the steam lifts from the bucket, it carries you back to another home, another morning, another quiet corridor. In the palace, they used scent not only to charm, but to claim space. Certain rooms were associated with specific perfumes. Servants could tell where they were in the building with their eyes closed. Amber for the sultana's sitting room, and sometimes, mixed into the oils and ointments, there were traces of something more personal. Names, embroidered, not onto tags or labels, but into the fabric of the cloths used to dab the oils. Not the public name, the private one, the name given to them at birth, before they were renamed upon entering palace service. These cloths were not used for public display. They were tools of ritual, laid across shoulders after bathing, draped over pillows during illness, passed quietly between friends within the gilded cage of the harem, but not always. A handful survived forgotten between ledgers, hidden within furniture, preserved in the sealed rooms of quiet apartments. Today, 3 are known to exist in museum collections. 2 more are rumored to be in private hands. Each carries a ghost, and when you hold them up to the light, the thread shimmers, the name reappears. A woman's true identity, buried under decades of silence, briefly, like breath on a cold window pane. You cannot help but imagine what it must have felt like to make one of those cloths, to press needle into silk, to form each letter, knowing it would likely never be read again. A final assertion of self, hidden in plain sight. Even in your work, there are echoes of this. When you hem your mistress's scarves, you sometimes slip a single mismatched stitch into the border. It is not for her, it is for you, a sign that your hands passed here, that you were real. that you were not just a shadow in the hall. And in this way, history continues, not in battles, not in treaties, but in hidden tunnels, old perfume, and delicate, nearly invisible names. There are days when the house feels heavier than usual, not in heat or in burden, but in silence. The walls seem to listen. The floorboards stretch a little slower. Even the sunlight feels more hushed, as if it, too, has paused to remember. On such days, you notice things you usually overlook. The thin crack along the base of the courtyard's fountain. The way the mosaic near the stairs forms a subtle eye shape you hadn't seen before. The uneven rhythm of footsteps on the landing, which sounds almost like a familiar voice returning. This is how memory settles into places. It doesn't announce itself. It lingers in form, in rhythm, in residue. Much like the old clues buried beneath Topkapı Palace. Take, for example, the game boards. They were discovered not in grand halls, but scratched into the stone steps of servants' quarters. Simple grid patterns, worn smooth by time, likely used to pass long hours while waiting between laundry loads, between errands, between punishments. The rules are forgotten, but the marks remain. Even in the seat of an empire, the human need to mark time, to play, to connect, to tendered. Then there are the spoons. You wouldn't think of spoons as meaningful, but tucked into a sealed storeroom once used by harem staff. Conservationists found a bundle of hand-carved wooden spoons wrapped in thin wool. Each was slightly different, one with a twisted handle, another with a heart-shaped bowl, one carved with tulips along the neck. None bore the hallmarks of official issue. These were not the property of the palace. They were personal. Some bore initials. Others had scratches along the underside, perhaps from nervous fidgeting, or maybe from being hidden too long beneath floorboards. Spoons, you realize, are among the few objects a servant might claim as their own. They touch the mouth, they carry flavor, they accompany you when no one else does. Each spoon told a story of ownership, of agency, of identity within a place that tried, at every level, to flatten individuality beneath protocol. Much like the name cloths, they were soft declarations. I was here, I had a name, I tasted the world, even if only in silence. A few lines, barely visible verses from a folk tune popular in the empire's northern provinces. Not official court poetry, not Arabic calligraphy, but something earthy, melancholy, likely sung by one of the Circassian or Georgian women brought into service. A lullaby, maybe, or a love song. We'll never know. But someone wrote it there. Someone knelt beneath the weight of cedar and ink and scratched it out during a moment when no one was watching. And somehow it remained. It's not the official records that stay with you, it's the small scraps, the nearly invisible legacies of hands like yours. You have your own version of these. In the servant's cupboard, you've hidden a strip of embroidery your sister made before she left for another household. You keep a cracked olive wood comb tucked beneath your mattress knot, beautiful, but it belonged to your mother. But you carry it. And someday, someone may find these and wonder, who did these belong to? What were they trying to say? In this way, the smallest objects resist forgetting. There is even a term among palace scribes, sessis mira silent inheritance, the way a servant folds a garment, the rhythm of prayer murmured during sweeping, the order in which trays are stacked for guest-sall, passed down without being recorded. These are clues about who held power, about who endured, and in the palace, sessis miras lives not only in objects, but in places. There is a stretch of hallway near the outer harem once lined with polished brass. One wall remains darker than the rest. For decades, servants would press their foreheads to that panel in silent prayer before delivering bad news to the sultana. The metal, warmed by thousands of silent heads, now bears a faint dip, just enough to catch the light, just enough to be noticed by those who know where to look. No record of the practice survives in official documents, but the wall remembers. Just as the marble remembers the footsteps of eunuchs who passed the same corridor for 40 years. Just as the lattice windows remember the glances of jealous rivals. Just as the storerooms remember the scent of fear that hung in the air when power shifted overnight. The palace is full of such memories, and so is your house. In the parlor where your mistress hosts guests, there is a particular spot where the rug curls just slightly. Years ago, her mother fainted there. She never speaks of it, but she does it every time. In the kitchen, a chipped plate is always given to the most talkative visitor. Your steward claims it's just habit, but you know it's a silent warning. Speak too much, and you'll be given what's flawed. Clues are everywhere, not loud, not official, but present. And as you move through your day, dusting shelves, smoothing beds, passing between sunlight and shadow, you begin to feel your own place within this quiet archive. You are not just a servant, you are a witness, a keeper of patterns, a bearer of silent inheritance. And one day, when the city has changed again, and your house is no longer standing, and your name has faded from the scrolls, someone may still feel your presence in a stitch, a scent, a spoon, or a scuffed corner of stone. Because history does not live only in the grand and the written. It lives in buried clues, in quiet choices, in what remains when no one is watching. And in that, you are never truly forgotten. Imagine the soft glow of evening lanterns flickering through lace curtains. The air carries the scent of burning amber and crushed mint. Outside, the city hums quietly, prayers drifting across domes and minarets like whispered blessings. Inside, behind latticed screens and heavy draperies, the unseen world comes alive. Here, in these secret spaces, belief holds a different shape. It is not the loud sermon or the grand public prayer. It is a subtle thread woven into daily life, a quiet companion to hope and fear, comfort and caution. You might know it as superstition, or tradition, or faith. But for those who live within the palace and its shadow, it is something more profound. Start with the talismans. The Nazar, or evil eye amulet, is everywhere. Small blue beads glint on necks and wrists. Tiny charms hang in doorways. Catch the morning light on chains of coral or silver, even embroidered into the hems of robes and the folds of scarves. The eye-round, watchful, protective orbs again and again. It is said to guard against envy and harm, to repel the gaze that seeks to steal your fortune, your health, your happiness. You may have seen similar beads in markets or on street corners, but within the palace, their meaning deepens. They are not mere decorations, they are shields. Each talisman is carefully blessed by a dervish or a spiritual elder before being given. Often, they are accompanied by whispered prayers and secret instructions about how to carry them close to the heart, never dropped, never given to strangers. Some women in the harem wear multiple Nazar beads layered beneath silk veils. Some eunuchs carry small charms sewn inside their tunics. Even the sultan's sword sheath might be decorated with an evil eye symbol, protecting the weapon from unseen harm. But talismans are only one part of this hidden belief. Dreams are another. Imagine yourself in your small chamber at night, the flicker of a candle guttering in the corner, the cool air pressing against your skin beneath the thin blankets. Your mind drifts as you fall asleep. Dreams come, as they always do, strange, tangled, sometimes vivid, sometimes fleeting. In the Ottoman world, dreams are not just private images, but messages, signs, portals between the visible and invisible. Among palace women and servants, dream interpretation is a quiet art. Certain dreams are recorded and shared within trusted circles. A white horse galloping might symbolize honor or impending news. A black snake could warn of danger or deception. To see a falcon might foretell a rise in status or fortune. Some keep dream journals, carefully noting the night's visions and their daytime meanings. Others consult learned elders or Sufi mystics who interpret the symbols and offer advice. The practice is deeply personal, yet woven into the fabric of daily decisions. If a servant dreams of water, she may wash her hands 3 times before dawn. If a noblewoman dreams of broken glass, she might delay meetings or avoid certain foods. Dreams guide, they comfort, they caution. And then there are the rituals of Sufism, hidden away from the grand mosques and public processions. The mystical orders practice quietly, within secluded rooms, adorned with carpets and cushions. The soft cadence of prayers rises and falls. The dhikr, rhythmic chanting of God's names, is whispered and sung. The hands move in gentle circles, the breath deepens. For many, this is a way to connect with something beyond the noise of palace intrigue and duty. The swirling robes of the whirling dervishes spin in private chambers, their motion a physical prayer, a trance. You might never witness these moments yourself, but you sense their presence like a faint melody beneath the louder hymns of empire. And even among those who do not formally belong to these orders, small Sufi practices seep into daily life. A prayer said before dawn, a whispered blessing over a cooking pot, the lighting of incense to ward off harm. These acts, simple yet profound, offer solace in a world where control often feels just beyond reach. You carry these beliefs with you, too. Perhaps you wear a small amulet hidden beneath your robe. Perhaps you pause to whisper a prayer before entering the kitchen. Perhaps you remember a dream that warned you against a certain path. They are threads connecting you to generations before you, women and men who lived in the same city, who walked the same streets, who dreamed similar dreams beneath the same stars. And as you breathe in the quiet night air, the scents of amber and mint rising softly, you feel that you are part of this long, unbroken chain. A chain of belief, hope, and whispered prayer. A chain that sustains even when the palace sleeps. As dawn slowly unfurls its pale light over Istanbul's domes and minarets, the city stirs, but within the palace and the servant quarters, the world often awakens more quietly, behind thick curtains and latticed windows. The first prayers are murmured, not the public ones, called by the muezzins, but private petitions uttered in soft voices, barely louder than the rustle of silk. You might imagine yourself in a small chamber just off the harem's main hall. The floor beneath you is covered with woven rugs, soft with years of footsteps and whispered secrets. The walls are decorated with faded calligraphy, verses of the Quran blending with Sufi poetry lines that speak of the soul's longing for union, the divine's presence in all things, the beauty found in surrender. In this space, the air is fragrant with burning sandalwood and wild rose petals. You sit cross-legged, holding a string of prayer beads, known as tesbih, their polished wood, cool beneath your fingers. Each bead represents a name of God, a breath of devotion, a moment of focus. The repetitive rhythm of counting, the gentle shifting of beads slipping through fingers, offers a form of meditation, a pathway inward. It calms the mind, steadies the heart. Among servants and palace women alike, such practices are a refuge, a quiet resistance against the unpredictable tides of court life. It is a place where power, gossip, and fear momentarily recede. Here, one is simply a seeker. The lines between the mystical and the mundane blur. For the woman who prepares the sultan's robe, the same prayer whispered before the stitching is offered to ensure safety. For the eunuch who cleans the courtyard, the same chant is a shield against unseen eyes. The Sufi orders many secretive. Some open offer teachings, not just in grand rituals, but in these small moments. They encourage a world seen through a lens of love, humility, and acceptance. This is not merely religion, it is a philosophy, a way of being, a way of finding light in shadow. You might have heard stories of the whirling dervishes, their robes billowing like clouds as they spin, lost in ecstatic remembrance. But within the palace walls, the whirling often happens in private chambers. Only a few trusted attendants witnessed it: the soft thrum of drum, the slow fall of silk, the dancers' eyes half closed, their feet barely touching the floor, their hearts beating in time with the sacred chant. This dance is more than movement, and when the music stops, there is a stillness, a silence so profound it almost sings. Beyond formal Sufi rituals, other beliefs persist. The reading of coffee grounds after the evening brew, a custom practiced both by the noble and the servant classes. The dregs swirled at the bottom of a cup offer hints, shapes, and shadows interpreted as omens. Is the heart-shaped mark a sign of love to come? Does the lone bird mean a journey? Or does the pattern warn of caution? In some households, this reading is a regular practice, a way to navigate uncertainty. The belief in jinn spirits inhabiting the unseen world also weaves through daily life. Many carry small herbs, like rue or sage, to ward off malevolent spirits. Doors might be hung with tiny bundles of garlic or red thread, silent barriers against harm. You might notice a faint blue bead dangling from your mistress's bracelet, or a slip of paper with a prayer tucked beneath a pillow. These are more than superstition. They are acts of protection, a language of care and concern. In the quiet corners of the palace, these beliefs create a sense of agencia, way to shape fate when so much seems uncontrollable. For those who serve, the rituals offer moments of peace. Even in the harshest days, when orders come down harshly, when the weight of expectation presses heavy, there is a breath of calm, a chance to find balance, to feel connected. And so, in this world of silenced power and hidden strength, the spiritual lives of the palace's inhabitants remain rich and vibrant. They are whispered prayers in the dark, the soft clink of beads sliding through fingers, and the quiet certainty that no matter what tomorrow brings, some things endure. Imagine stepping through a carved wooden door into one of the many private chambers tucked deep within the labyrinthine halls of the Topkapı Palace. The soft clatter of your slippers against polished marble floors fades into a gentle silence, broken only by the whisper of the breeze drifting through intricately latticed windows. Here, the world feels slower, more deliberate. The air is heavy with the scent of amber and rosewater, mingling with the faint aroma of beeswax candles flickering in brass sconces. Your eyes adjust to the warm glow, and the room reveals itself as a sanctuary of quiet luxury. Rich velvet drapes hang in soft folds along the walls, dyed in deep hues of sapphire and emerald, their surfaces catching the light with a subtle shimmer. The texture of velvet is almost tangible, soft, dense, and cool beneath your fingertips, offering a tactile contrast to the hard marble and carved wood around you. Resting against one wall is a magnificent peacock fan, its iridescent feathers fanning out like a living jewel. Each plume shimmers with blues and greens that shift as the light moves, the eyes on the feathers seeming to watch silently, guarding the room with their silent vigilance. Such fans were more than decorative, they were status symbols, carried by the ladies of the court during warm summer afternoons and ceremonial occasions. The fan's gentle fluttering not only cooled the air but also sent unspoken messages, part of the subtle language of the palace's intricate social dance. Near the fan, a low divan is piled with cushions embroidered with gold thread, their patterns echoing the gardens outside. Stylized tulips and delicate vines twist and curl across the fabric, tiny stitches glinting like sunlight on water. The cushion's softness invites repose, a rare comfort in a place where rest was often brief and measured. On a nearby low table sits a crystal bowl filled with mountain ice crushed into sparkling shards that glitter like tiny stars. This ice was a precious commodity, brought down from the high ranges surrounding Istanbul and carefully stored in deep underground chambers to last through the summer months. From a silver pitcher beside it, sherbet is poured chilled, sweet and fragrant with rosewater, sour cherry, or pomegranate. The cold sweetness of the sherbet offers relief from the humid heat, refreshing the palate and soothing the throat after long hours of courtly duties. You reach for a delicately cut glass, its thin rim cool against your lips. The sherbet's flavor is light, but layered, floral, and tart, a liquid poem of the empire's far-flung orchards and gardens. As you sip, the room's textures and scents weave together a symphony of velvet softness, the sparkling chill of ice, the shimmer of gold, and the gentle rustle of feathers. The ladies who once occupied this chamber understood these sensations well. To them, such comforts were not mere luxuries, but lifelines. The weight of velvet was a shield, absorbing the pressures of court intrigue and whispered gossip. The shimmer of gold thread spoke of lineage and favor, of alliances forged and fortunes balanced delicately on fabric and gesture. The cool touch of sherbet, the gentle flicker of a peacock fan, these were pauses, breaths taken between moments of performance and survival. Beyond the sensory, these objects held stories. The velvet caftans were hand-woven with threads imported from the Mediterranean coasts, their dyes derived from plants and minerals known only to a few. Each garment was tailored meticulously to fit its patterns, symbolizing everything from imperial authority to personal virtue. Some caftans bore embroidery that marked rank. Others were gifts commemorating special occasions, birthdays, weddings, or diplomatic visits. Imagine the quiet ritual of donning one of these caftans. The fabric slides over bare skin, cool and heavy. The wearer adjusts the sleeves, feeling the weight of gold thread catch in the light. The silk lining murmurs softly, a companion to the heartbeat beneath. Similarly, the gold thread cushions were prized possessions. Not only did they soften hard surfaces, but they also served as subtle displays of wealth and taste. Their embroidery echoed garden motifs, the empire's vision of paradise on earth, linking the occupant to a larger cosmic order. Each stitch was a prayer for comfort, prosperity, and peace. These moments of luxury, soothing, beautiful, deliberative, heard a respite from the demanding routines that governed every day. For the women of the harem, they were spaces to gather quietly, to share stories, to exchange secret glances and whispered confidences. The peacock fan, for example, was a tool of subtle communication. Opening or closing it at a measured pace might signal approval or disapproval. A slight flutter could invite conversation or suggest retreat. Its feathers, sourced from distant lands, carried not just aesthetic value, but symbolic meaning. Peacocks represented beauty, renewal, and watchfulness. To hold such a fan was to claim a kind of power, however delicate. Sherbet itself was more than refreshment. It was a ceremonial drink, often served at important moments, a visit from an envoy, the arrival of news, or the conclusion of negotiations. The cold mountain ice that cooled it was treasured, a reminder of the empire's vastness and reach, capable of transporting a piece of the faraway mountains into the heart of the city. In this way, every sensation in the room, the cool velvet, the shimmer of gold, the chill of sherbet, the soft flick of feathers, was part of a language, a quiet conversation between object and person, tradition and desire, power and grace. And as you sit among these comforts, feeling the texture of velvet against your skin and the faint coolness of a fan brushing your cheek, you might imagine the countless women who once lived within these walls. Women whose lives were shaped by ceremony and silence, by duty and dreams, by the interplay of light and shadow. They found strength in these moments of softness, in the golden threads and peacock feathers. They found comfort in sherbets chilled with mountain ice, in cushions embroidered with care. And in this, you find a thread connecting past to present, a delicate, shimmering thread of velvet and gold. As the heavy velvet curtains part to reveal the inner sanctum of the palace chamber, you step into a world that pulses with subtle opulence, where the very air seems embroidered with history and quiet luxury. The ornate latticework filters sunlight into delicate patterns across the floor, like intricate shadows cast by an unseen hand, dancing slowly as if in time with the slow heartbeat of the empire itself. Here, velvet is not merely fabric, it is a tactile symbol of power and protection. Its lush softness cushions the weary and cloaks the vulnerable, a tangible comfort in a world that is otherwise rigid and exacting. The threads, dyed in deep lapis lazuli blues and rich emerald greens, shimmer faintly beneath the filtered light, recalling the jewel tones of the Ottoman treasury, where gold and precious stones gleamed in endless abundance. The velvet's weight carries with it the whispers of countless hands artisans who labored in distant workshops, carefully spinning and weaving, dyeing the fibers with natural pigments extracted from indigo, woad, and pomegranate skins. Each bolt of cloth is infused with the scent of earth and plant, a faint reminder of the land's bounty even within these stone walls. You reach out and let your fingers trail along the sleeve of a velvet caftan draped across a nearby chair. The fabric is cool, smooth, and dense. As you lift it, the embroidered gold threads catch the light, delicate filigree of tiny leaves and swirling vines that wind across the sleeve like living veins. Each stitch is a testament to the patience and skill of the palace embroiderers, often women themselves, whose hands moved tirelessly by candlelight, weaving stories of nature, faith, and fortune into every garment. These kaftans were worn by those who moved through the palace's labyrinthine corridors, the sultan's favored concubines, the daughters of noble families, the trusted attendants. Their colors and patterns spoke volumes in a language understood only by those within the court's inner circle. Deep crimson signaled passion and strength. Soft mauve whispered of humility and grace. Gold thread embroidered pomegranates symbolized fertility and abundance, while delicate tulips represented perfect beauty and divine order. Donning one of these kaftans was a ritual in itself. The wearer might pause before a mirror framed with Mother Vupro, adjusting the fabric so that every fold fell just so. Every shimmer of gold was visible, yet understated. It was an act of quiet assertion, an unspoken claim to status, favor, and identity in a world where appearances often spoke louder than words. Below, the floor was softened by cushions piled high in rich hues of garnet and saffron, their silk covers embroidered with gold thread in elaborate motifs that echoed the palace gardens just beyond the lattice windows. The designs were inspired by the natural world, twisting vines, blooming jasmine, fluttering butterflies, and stylized birds of paradise. These cushions invited rest, but also served as subtle status markers. To recline upon them was to be surrounded by the empire's beauty and order a soft throne in a realm where power was often hard and cold. Sinking into one such cushion, you notice the faint scent of musk and sandalwood lingering in the fabric, an invisible aura left by the hands and bodies that had rested here before. These fragrances were carefully layered musk extracted from rare animals and blended with fragrant woods sourced from distant forests. Their smoky aroma carried across caravan routes that stretched from Persia to Anatolia. On a low table beside you sits a crystal bowl filled with crushed mountain ice diamonds of frozen water harvested during winter and stored in deep, cool cellars beneath the palace. Such ice was a treasure, a marvel of engineering and logistics, transported carefully to cool the summer air and the delicate sherbets that accompanied court gatherings. Pouring from a silver ewer, the sherbet spills gently into a glass, its rosewater scent mingling with pomegranate's subtle tartness and the faint sweetness of mint. The first sip is crisp and refreshing, a delicate balance of cool and sweet that refreshes the tongue and soothes the throat after hours of conversation and ceremony. Sherbets were more than mere drinks. They were symbols of hospitality, moments of shared pleasure and respite from the intense formality that permeated palace life. The peacock fan resting nearby is itself a masterpiece of nature and craft. Its feathers, shimmering with iridescent blues, greens, and purples, fan out like the tail of a living jewel. The delicate ice pots seem to shimmer with life, a silent but constant presence, watching, protecting. The fan was a subtle instrument of communication. Flicking it open or closed could send messages across a room, signals understood by those versed in the court's complex social codes. These fans were often carried by the Sultan's favorites, their presence marking status, but also offering a rare means of expression in a world where speech was carefully monitored and controlled. A slow flutter could signal welcome or encouragement. A sharp snap shut might convey displeasure or warning. In the quiet spaces behind lattice screens, these gestures spoke volumes. Beyond their beauty and utility, these objects velvet, gold embroidery, sherbet, fans, cushions embodied the fragile balance of power and grace that defined Ottoman court life. They softened harsh realities, offered moments of pleasure and self-assertion, and connected their bearers to a vast and intricate web of cultural meaning. For those who wore velvet caftans and fanned themselves with peacock feathers, these luxuries were not indulgences but vital tools for navigating the subtle intrigues and alliances that shaped their days. They were symbols of resilience, markers of identity, and quiet declarations of presence within a world where so much was hidden behind layers of protocol and secrecy. As you sit surrounded by these textures and scents, imagine the countless stories they hold, the whispered promises made in the hush of twilight, the secret glances exchanged over golden cushions, the solitary moments of reflection as a fan stirred the warm air. Each object is a thread in the tapestry of empire, woven through with power, desire, and survival. And in this slow, shimmering world of velvet and gold, you find yourself carried gently forward, wrapped in comfort and history as the palace's quiet pulse continues beneath the weight of centuries. Imagine yourself wandering quietly through the deeper interior corridors of Topkapı Palace as the day draws to a hush. The fading sunlight filters through intricate wooden lattice screens, casting long, fractured patterns of shadow across the tiled floors. You pass into a quiet salon, private, dimly lit, wrapped in velvet silence. This is not a place of ceremony or spectacle. It is a room of quiet negotiation, a cradle of whispered strategy, and a chamber where silence carries meaning. The walls are softened by tapestries in muted golds and deep maroons, their edges worn from decades of watching. Above, the lanterns flicker lazily, their glow caught in the delicate mother-of-pearl inlays of the wall panels. And in the air gentle and warm is the scent of fresh cardamom coffee, mingled with the fading floral trace of rose attar, carried from another room on the folds of silk. Here, in this quiet and secluded chamber, the empire breathes through whispers. Gathered around a low, polished wooden table are men who do not shout, who do not stride, but who influence the fate of sultans. They are the eunuchs, the princely sons, the court spies. Their robes are soft and flowing, their movements measured and unhurried, their expressions as carefully composed as the embossed lids of the porcelain coffee cups they cradle in their palms. The coffee is thick and dark, its surface swirling faintly as it settles. It is sipped slowly and in silence, not simply for flavor, but to pass time, to offer pause between spoken lines. It is part of a ritual that speaks to patience, to presence, and to power. In Ottoman Istanbul, and especially within the complex machinery of the imperial court, coffee was more than refreshment. It was the setting for diplomacy. Each conversation that occurred over coffee held multiple meanings. The preparation itself, slow, careful, rich, with intent, mirrored the conversations it accompanied. A misstep in either could spoil everything. The eunuchs, in particular, are central to this room and to the empire's inner workings. They have lived lifetimes behind these walls, many of them taken from their homes in childhood and reshaped into instruments of palace will. Some are tall and composed, some small and quietly observant. Many are African, others Balkan or Caucasian, depending on the generation and reigning sultan. They do not rule, but they guide. They do not command armies, but they open doors that others may never pass through. Their positions, especially those of the chief black eunuch, are ones of astonishing trust. They know the secrets of the harem. They manage the palace's internal economy, and they act as gatekeepers to the Sultan himself. Despite their status, they are rarely discussed in public narratives. Their power lies in being present without drawing attention, remembered only by those who fear or need them. Seated nearby are the princes, not always in favor, not always in danger, but never at ease. These are the sons of the dynasty, some legitimate, others perhaps born to concubines, all brought up within the confined luxury of the imperial palace. Their garments are simple, but fine kaftans of soft wool and cotton lined with fur. Their hair is groomed, their eyes always watching. They speak in soft voices, cautious and thoughtful. Their words are indirect. They do not say what they mean, because, in Topkapı, directness is a liability. Each sentence is wrapped in metaphor, each question veiled in politeness. They talk of hunting expeditions, of garden renovations, of scholars and poetry, but beneath the surface, their real topic is always power. Who holds it now, who might tomorrow, and who must be watched? Some of these sons will never leave the palace. The policy of confinement caging princes within palace walls for years to prevent rebellion means that many grow up in golden rooms filled with boredom, fear, and ambition. These conversations over coffee may be their only exercise in influence. They practice diplomacy as others practice fencing. Then there are the spies, not named as such, of course. They may be described as stewards, messengers, translators, or clerks, but they are watchers, listeners, scribes of rumor and movement. Some work for the Grand Vizier, others for foreign consuls. A few serve the valid sultan, the sultan's mother, whose reach often surpasses that of generals. They do not speak much. They nod at the right moments. Occasionally, they offer a line or two a report about troop movements in the east, a comment on a change in behavior from a favored concubine, a mention of a shipment delayed from the Venetian fleet. Their information is rarely dramatic, but always useful. The room is quiet, except for the sounds of the coffee service. Porcelain clinks softly on silver trays. A cloth is folded. A whisper echoes and fades. Occasionally, the thick silence is broken by laughter, soft and slow, more often polite than amused. The lattice screens that surround the chamber are not mere decoration. They are metaphor given form. They allow one to see without being seen, to hear without being heard. They are the boundary between those who speak and those who truly understand. Through them, servants pass unnoticed, listeners linger, and messages move. This is not an isolated moment. Meetings like this take place daily, weekly, always timed carefully to coincide with a pause in the Sultan's schedule, a lull in court ceremonies, a gap between decrees. It is in these pauses that empire happens, not in proclamations, but in cautious agreements, small gestures, favors exchanged and remembered. Here, a eunuch may mention that the Sultan's attention has turned toward the Georgian girl in the harem. A prince may ask, innocently, whether anyone has seen the Janissary commander this week. A spy may comment that a minor palace architect has been assigned to work in the privy garden. To outsiders, these would be unremarkable facts. But in this room, where everyone speaks in a second tongue of politics, these are pieces of a larger puzzle. You watch the body language, the subtle tilt of a head, the flick of a fan, the tapping of a finger on a porcelain cup. These are the punctuation marks of power. A long pause before sipping may indicate disagreement. A second refill may mean approval. A refusal of sweets may be a quiet protest. The art of court politics in Ottoman Istanbul was an art of patience. No one speaks quickly here. No one raises their voice. No one betrays frustration. Every word is slow and deliberate, and every silence more deliberate still. And as the sky outside the lattice grows darker, as the lamps are lit and the scent of melting beeswax fills the air, the gathering winds down. No decisions are written, no announcements are made, but everyone in the room leaves knowing what must happen next. The eunuchs return to their corridors, the princes to their apartments, the spies to their reports. The room is empty, save for the lingering warmth of the coffee and the faint echo of voices that have shaped the course of the empire once more. And you sit there for a while longer, feeling the hush settle over everything, knowing you have just witnessed the quiet engine of power at work. No blood was spilled, no names were shouted, no wars declared, but somewhere in the folds of that soft conversation, history moved a fraction forward. This is how empires are ruled, not in battlefields or ceremonies, but in low rooms behind carved wooden screens, where the most important things are never said aloud. As our journey through the quiet corridors of Ottoman Istanbul draws to a close, imagine yourself once again stepping outside the palace walls. The gentle hum of the city surrounds you, the soft footsteps of passersby, the distant murmur of the Bosphorus waves lapping against the shore, and the warm breeze carrying scents of spices and jasmine from nearby markets. The stories you have heard, the whispered intrigues behind lattice screens, the shimmering velvet and gold of palace chambers, the hidden rituals and subtle power plays, all these form a tapestry woven from lives lived with patience, resilience, and complexity. You have glimpsed the daily rhythms of servants burdened with endless tasks, the rise and fall of remarkable figures like Kakesum, Sultan, the secret beliefs and delicate comforts that shaped an empire's heart. Though these tales speak of hardship, power struggles, and whispered fears, they also reveal moments of grace, strength, and humanity that echo quietly through time. The softness of velvet, the cool refreshment of sherbet, the flicker of a peacock fan, they are reminders that even amidst strict hierarchies and shadowed intrigues, people sought beauty, comfort, and connection. Now, as you settle deeper into your own space of rest, feel the gentle contrast of your world where freedom and peace unfold around you. Let the calm rhythms of history soothe your thoughts, and the quiet strength of those who came before offer you a gentle lullaby. May your mind drift softly, carried by the steady pulse of time, towards restful sleep and peaceful dreams. Thank you for traveling through history with me tonight. Until we meet again, rest well.